You're listening to Curiosity Invited with David Bryan here on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, my name is David Bryan, and this is Curiosity Invited, a podcast inspired by endless curiosity. Tune in for an open-minded conversation about interesting and important things. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Curiosity Invited. My name is David Bryan, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with someone I've actually just recently met, but he's an interesting fellow. His name is, well, now, do I call you Dr. Owner Yenigan, or can I call you Owner Yenigan or Owner? But he is formerly, if you meet him on the street, this is Dr. Owner Yenigan, and he is a medical doctor, and among many other things. So let's start with those many other things. And thank you first for being willing to come on and talk about what you do and what your life is like and insights you have had from that. And
Sure.
and wait, actually, first I want to ask a question, and maybe I shouldn't even ask, and maybe I'll just take this out, which is like, how old are you?
I'm 37 years old.
37 years old. So you've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. So
Well, thank you.
so yeah, well, right, yeah. So
Doesn't feel like a short period of time.
I know it doesn't. Yeah, just wait. You just
Great.
don't even start. It's like
All right. Yes, sir.
I look in the mirror. I look in the mirror sometimes, like, wait, how did this happen? But I still feel like a kid. What do you mean? So
I love it.
so okay. So you're a bunch of different things, and a bunch of different. I think from the outside looking in, people would say, well, you're a bunch of different identities. So your mom and your dad both came from Turkey to the United States,
Correct.
and you were born here and raised here. But did you feel like you were sort of straddling two different worlds because they were an immigrant family, or did they assimilate right away? And because I know you speak Turkish as well as English, but
Yeah, it's a bit tough question to answer. I mean, they were, they did immigrate here. I'm first generation here. My childhood was so kind of tumultuous that it was really hard to really grasp any identity. My dad left when I was 3, so it was really my mom raising me, but
Right.
she had a tough time. So my grandmother moved in with us, who only speaks Turkish and is
oh,
very Turkish. So I learned a lot of values and culture from her. And then a lot of my younger formative years I spent with babysitters as well. So I got to, experience many, many different cultures and people and religions as well. I've been to many different types of churches. So I've been exposed to so much. So it's really hard to grasp
yeah.
a true identity at a young age.
That's interesting. So your grandmother who raised you, she spoke Turkish. She was very Turkish, whatever that. And was she Muslim?
Yes.
Yeah. And were you raised in a particular religion? Were you raised to be? Or do you identify as a Muslim? Do you identify in other ways, or?
I'm not really religious in that sense. No,
Yeah.
I mean, my grandmother never pushed the religion on me. She would always, talk about here and there, talk about God and Allah and all that
Yeah.
stuff, but she never had me pray. She never had me do any of that stuff. Just really, I think she just wanted to instill some good values in me and use religion as a means
Yes.
of doing that in some sense.
Yeah. And you went back to visit your dad when you were a kid, or you grew up and went back to visit your dad?
I didn't really speak to my dad from when I was age 3 until I was 19.
Oh wow!
He
So
he
was
found
really,
me. He found me.
Wow. Was that a surprise? Like, who the hell are you? What do you want? Or what? Like,
It really was. It was actually when I was in the military, and I got a phone call from my commandant saying, "Come to my office. Your dad's on the phone." So
wow,
it was
man,
interesting.
that is really wild. Was that? Do you remember the moment? I mean, was it like, wow, that's great, or was like, what the hell is this?
Part of that's a blur. I do remember when I actually first met him, though. We met in a hotel in Claremont, California, and it was pretty surreal. Seeing my
Yeah.
dad for the first time since I was 3. Because the only really memory from childhood I have is for some reason being in a ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese and him throwing me into it. Besides that, I had nothing. So it was quite the difference.
Okay, so you grew up mostly in California. I mean, moving around in California for the most part. Yeah.
Yes, it
And
bounced around a lot between northern and southern.
okay, and I know we spoke about this before, but I think it's an interesting trajectory, right? So then h- how'd you make it to med school? Med school was not first. First you went into the military. And was that a plan from the start? Like when I grow up, I want to be a military person or talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. On the contrary, it was actually I knew that I wanted to be a doctor. When I was young, I was living with my aunt and uncle, and my mom was having a pretty tough time, not being able to be with her son all the time, and it put her into a pretty dark place. And I wanted to be in some way useful. I used to watch that TV show ER a lot with George Clooney. I don't know if you ever remember it.
Oh yes.
But my mother's like the twin of one of the nurses on that show.
Oh well.
And I can remember calling my mom in 4th grade and saying, "Mom, I want you to be happy. You should be a nurse because they're happy on TV." And she was obviously tough to convince, but I eventually did. So I moved back in, and 5th and 6th grade every night I would study with her, translate nursing books into Turkish. We'd make flashcards, and I one found it so fascinating. Reading as a 5th grader how when I scrape my knee it stops bleeding. But also my mom she started out as a CNA, and I just saw her just find so much happiness and joy in helping others, and realized that not only medicine was cool, but it kind of saved my mom. And that's when I really started to fall in love with it. And
And
I
she
knew I
did
wanted to
become
be
a
a
nurse. She
doctor.
became a nurse.
Oh, she climbed the ladder my whole life. I mean, she started as a CNA, became a medical assistant, became an LVN. It was actually my 3rd year of medical school. I got to leave the operating room. I was on a surgery rotation and go help pin her as a nurse in her RN ceremony. And
That's
then the
cool.
next year, she got to hood me as a doctor. So it's kind of been our journey together my whole life.
That's pretty fabulous. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
So, but before that came the military.
Yes, yes.
What was that about? What was that? Where did that come from? Was it? I mean, like
Sure.
you kind of pointed at it, but
Yeah, I knew what I wanted to do in my life, but I was not the prototypical kid that becomes a doctor. Come from an immigrant family. No father figure in my life. We were on welfare and food stamps growing up. I was not the kid that goes and just becomes a doctor. And I think I had a lot of issues in believing in myself and believing that I could accomplish that mission. And I kind of decided that maybe this would be a good way for me to prove to myself that I could accomplish something challenging. I finished high school when I was 15, not because I was a super smart student. I mean, I had no discipline. I was I
get,
was terrible at doing
get the hell
homework.
out of here.
I mean, I was great at taking tests, but I didn't have any real discipline, and I felt like I was getting into trouble a bit. And I met a recruiter on campus, and I said, "Hey, I want to do this." And he took me to his office. They had me take the entrance test, and they said, "You could be a nuclear engineer." And I said, "No, just give me the hardest job you have. Like, my goal is to go in there and get my butt kicked and come out a different person." And that's what I did. So, I'd
You
only
were
done one semester of community college before I joined the Marine Corps, and I did absolutely terrible. I had C's, withdraws. I had 1A in Taekwondo, which I'm sure was a pity A, as I believe I told you in the past. But when I got out and I came back, I went to that same community college and I had nothing but straight A's. So it definitely was a transformative experience. Well, no, I went in at 18. So I
you went
worked for
to
a few
the
years and
okay.
helped support the home. I worked at a furniture store actually. Did that for a while and then
Yeah.
decided to hop into the Corps.
Yeah. Okay, so you went to the Marine Corps and you got stationed where? All around?
Yeah, I was at Camp Pendleton here in Southern California. Was at sea for a while, Japan, Philippines, all over. Really,
Did
it
you
was
get, did you
interesting.
did you get sent to places where there's combat?
I wasn't truly
Did
in
you
a
want?
combat zone, even though I was in an infantry unit. Interestingly enough, but we had some tough moments,
Did
definitely.
did you
But
want
yeah,
that? Did you want that? I mean, were you like at that age where you were like,
mm,
give me action, give me something, let me prove myself?
mm. I was prepared for it. I don't think anyone truly, wants to go into a situation where you're going to have to hurt others or potentially hurt yourself or potentially lose the lives of your brothers and
Sure.
sisters that you're serving next to. But I was definitely ready for it. And I did see it as a potential challenge that would have helped me grow. But I think I got enough. I got more than what I needed out of my service. And, you know, I'm proud of everyone I served with.
And was it so the whole time you're there, it's still in your mind that you want to be a doctor, or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was. It was. It was always in the back of my mind. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So
Sure.
does one of those does one of those for lack of a better term identities roles, whether it's whether it's a, a kid a kid who is Turkish ethnically, a uh, uh, a kid who was raised by a single mom, a Marine,
Mhm.
um, off to medical school, a doctor. Like, does one of them, like, do you sit in one of those in a bigger way? Like, do you feel like one of those has made you, you are first and foremost but does one of those stand out as primary
I think one of the biggest things I do identify is as a veteran.
as a veteran?
I get to work with veterans often now. It's a close community for me. It means a lot, and it was able to take all the I was able to take all the challenges and everything in my childhood and my upbringing and just kind of throw it all into that and transform it into something that's made me a lot stronger. And I think that was able to, that's what made me able to do all that. So I think that is a big part of my identity. But so is, being first generation in this country. It's not easy, you know. So is being raised by a single mother. It's not easy for me, nor was
Right,
it
right.
for her. And that all I value all those things and I value those challenges and the adversity. But I think the thing now that if I was to, lay back on it would be that I'm a veteran because that really lifts me up and makes me feel that I can do a lot more than I ever thought I could.
Yeah, that's interesting. I sort of was imagining that most of my pals, most of my buddies, one way or another, who have been in military service. There's something about that experience that it's almost like you know, it's almost like you get into the fires together. And I don't necessarily
Yeah,
mean active, people shooting at you, but you get into the cauldron, and it somehow creates this special thing that when you bump into one, it
yeah.
there it is. It pulls that out, and so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you went to be a doctor, but and
Yeah.
but it's not just a doctor. You're an emergency room doctor, and that is a
Yeah.
unique. I mean, I get they all are, right? Sure, a brain surgeon is or whatever, but
Sure.
it's not family practice. You're not sitting in the office all day, next patient, next patient. It's a
I don't think I could. I don't think
yeah.
I could.
What do you mean? Too boring?
I mean, I don't know. When I was in medical school, we rotated everything. We try it all out, so you know what's right for you. And then family practice, I just couldn't do. I mean, when you show up and you have a schedule, at 6 o'clock it's a cough, at 7 o'clock it's a physical, and 8 o'clock so I have a headache. It's just that the day felt too scripted for me, and I couldn't do it. It's one of the things I love about emergency medicine is how unpredictable it is.
Mm,
You never know what's coming. You have no idea what's walking through the door, and it's one of the few fields in medicine where our patients are undifferentiated, right? I mean, you go to see a neurologist is typically because you have a migraine or you have some type of neurological disorder. You go to see a pulmonologist because you have cystic fibrosis or a pneumonia that won't go away or something. But in the ER, you're coming because you have this lingering cough or you have this odd chest pain or this new swelling or mass in your leg. So there's a puzzle aspect to it that I truly love. The unpredictability I truly love. And it's a lot like the Marine Corps in a sense that you in one moment are taking care of somebody that stitching up their finger, and next moment paramedics call in and say, hey, in 3 minutes we're coming in with someone that's shot 3 times in the chest, and you have to take this emergency department full of nurses and techs and everybody else and turns this well-oiled machine, and boom, we're all ready to go in there and save a life. And it's so much like the Marine Corps. We have to snap together. You have to make difficult decisions in just moments, and it's a high pressure situation. So I felt like it was also one of the fields where I could apply everything that I learned in my service and put it into something useful.
And then, you had told me that for a time you worked at Cedars, but then specifically worked elsewhere, right? I mean, chose someplace that was that was I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's less resourced or it certainly gets different clientele in. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Cedars was a great place, but where I'm working now, it's definitely a ton of trauma. We have a large homeless population that has very poor access to primary care. We just see so many sick patients, and our numbers of patients we see a day are through the roof. And it's just a real good chance to make an impact in the community. Not that I wasn't overseas, in an amazing hospital, bunch of brilliant doctors, but here I feel like a lot of times really am like on my own sometimes, doing what I can to make a difference. And I feel like that's where I belong. That's where I can handle that. I love that.
And just to paint the picture, you know, is there how many doctors are in the emergency room at one time? Obviously there's extraordinary situations, but is it one? Is it two? Is it is the whole team of them?
There's two of us on at a time at this
Two.
hospital. I also work out in Bakersfield in the Central Valley sometimes, and there I'm the only doctor for the ER and actually the only one in the hospital. And I work nights there. So if something happens, on the third floor, I'm running up with a nurse and a tech to go up there and handle the situation. So both situations are quite challenging, but it's helped me grow so much, and I
Well,
appreciate that.
so wait, so in Bakersfield, you're sometimes the only doctor in the hospital, small hospital, I take it, but still, that means an enormous variety of things can come your way, some of which you probably don't have a lot of experience in. Yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you
That's I
do?
mean, that's why emergency medicine is what it is. I mean, that's why we always work so hard to get a little bit of knowledge and everything. That's why our residency training is like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, you'll spend a month delivering babies, and then you spend a month, in surgery, and then you spend a month doing orthopedics, and that's why it is what it is, because it's just you never know what's going to show up.
And
I
how
built.
long is the residency to become an emergency
It
room doc?
varies. It varies, but it's 3 to 4 years. A lot of programs are moving to 4 years. My program was 4 years at Stanford, but that's more common now.
Okay, so you also made mention of, did I get this right? Did you become a doctor at the beginning of COVID, or was it something like that where you and COVID
Ah,
overlapped in a significant way?
yeah, COVID got me good. Well, when COVID was really kicking off, I was actually in my final year of residency. Um, and so it was a real challenge because we were having so many sick patients coming in, and our emergency department was getting flooded. And a lot of these patients, since it's a respiratory disease, a lot of them were really crashing from that standpoint, and a lot of them needed intubation, which were put them to sleep and put a breathing tube in. And we ended up kind of making a policy where it was really just the most experienced people who would do the intubations. And at that point, it was us senior residents, our small group of it was 12 or 13 of us. So we were just always doing the intubations, and it just became. I mean, it was one. It's just so challenging because you're doing it over and over, and the patients are so sick, but also kind of sad at times because family members couldn't come into the room before we did this, and they never know if they're going to see their family member
Oh,
again.
wow.
But it was just such a scary disease. There were some moments where we were FaceTiming family members so they could at least give their well wishes or whatever they're going to say to their family members before we intubated them. So it was like a very emotional and hardly charged time in my training. But it was also fascinating. The whole time in residency, our attendings were just teaching us and teaching us things that they knew that we hadn't seen before. And this was the first time in our training where this was a new entity for all of us. So
Hmm.
instead of them just teaching us, we were all learning together, you know. And I thought that was a really interesting way to end out my residency training.
And did you? I mean, it was a crazy time in the world, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
First there was everybody stay, distance yourself, stay away, right? Stay away from other breathing, living human beings. And then,
Yeah.
and then, now masks doesn't make sense because people were wearing masks. And then I was like, oh no, the mask makes sense. You have to
Yeah.
wear a mask. And I mean, that whole thing going on. And then the idea of being, in the medical world at that time just seems crazy intense.
Yeah. It was. And there was a lot of discussions and people asking questions over and over, and some that none of us knew the answers to yet, which was challenging. I think one of the biggest mistakes they made was just the term social distancing. I hated that term. I think physical distancing, yes, but socially distancing yourselves from
Right.
people was one of the worst things you could absolutely do during a pandemic when you're already scared. People are locked in their homes. They don't have any human interaction. The socially distance makes no sense, right? Reach out to your loved ones, talk to people. Do not feel alone. You may have to physically be alone, but that social distancing term, I think they could have changed maybe to something more like physical distancing. But I mean, because it had such an impact, right? People didn't think about this, but the amounts of young children I saw coming into the emergency department was suicidality.
Oh, for real?
Suicidality. The mental impact on children was insane. And I didn't hear much about it, but the kids kept coming in just so depressed. Because think about it. I mean, especially for young kids, their social
Oh,
circle is what they have, right?
right.
They're not going to work every day. They don't have a job where they have to apply themselves to. You know what
Well,
I mean? All they have is their
they're
social
supposed to
circle.
go to school, and which means staring at a
Yeah.
screen, which was crazy, crazy absurd. As if somehow that was. I mean, obviously there are some people who can do that, but
Yeah.
right. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean that mental health aspect of it was tough because to deal with all the patients, like truly medically ill from that standpoint, from the respiratory stuff and everything else, to also have to deal with the impact on the children it was pretty tough. And that's when they come into the emergency department.
So wait, so tell me about that. So kids are depressed, and their parents bring them into emergency because they're depressed.
A kid swallows a bottle of Tylenol because they want to harm themselves. The first place they're coming is to the emergency department.
Yeah,
If a
yeah.
kid cuts themselves, they're coming to the emergency department. If a kid, in the middle of the night, your 8-year-old comes up to you and says, "I really want to kill myself." The parents, they get scared. And where else are you who are you gonna call in the middle of the night? The only place you can go where you're gonna see a doctor is the emergency department. So
Mm.
we deal with a lot of mental health, and during that, and with adults, it's hard and it's very sad. But to see a child in that state is challenging enough as it is, and to see it so much of it then was even more so.
Mm. Do you have insight into how they could have handled it? They, meaning whoever it is that handles those things, not the doctors, not the frontline people, but the policymakers. Did you end up with an insight or at least ideas about how things might have been done in a way that was less negatively impactful on people?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough question, right? There's just so much to unpack there. I do think that, I mean, the whole way that you even develop immunity, the whole concept of herd immunity is that you have to have some of the herd exposed or at least vaccinated, right? And if you take college dorms, we have mostly really healthy young people, and you let them still stay in their college dorms where they can spread it amongst each other and start developing immunity, then maybe that's a good thing, right? If you lock up every single person into their home and never let anybody out, you develop zero immunity in your population, right? I mean, because it's not getting around. And then when you open the doors and let everyone back out, you're back at stage one, right? Where no one's immune. And especially early on when we had no vaccines, I mean, that's kind of that was only our only option. And that could have been a way we handled it, but we didn't. And I'm sure we're learning from those mistakes.
Was it this was it well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe there isn't an answer to this, but was the disease more deadly at first? I mean, it seems like over time, the variants, as you folks, or at least the researchers explain it, right? The mutations sort of evolve so that they become more easily spread, but they don't necessarily kill their hosts because that's a bad plan. And
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
so
mean,
over
it's
time,
evolution.
but
Yeah.
so it would just seem like when I mean, I don't know if you saw them. I mean, I remember watching videos of people like literally
Yeah.
just keeling over in the street. Like,
Sure.
but
Hmm.
it just seemed like if there was just a way, this is me speaking, right? Not with no expertise, but if there was just a way to have made it so that not everything, we live at a wacky time, right? Everything's a political issue.
Yeah.
Everything. Like masks became a political issue.
Sure.
Masks, no
It's
mask.
true.
It's as if you're making some sort of a statement. And early on, it just seemed like that was just the worst time to have
Sure.
the sidedness, the intense tribal sidedness about everything, It's like I was crazy. So the idea of living through that
Yeah.
and and then, I mean, did policy change at the hospital? Like as things were evolving? Like first everybody had to be
Policy
vaccinated.
definitely changed.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no, they were essentially, if we weren't vaccinated, we were going to get let go. So it wasn't a vaccine was not an option. It was either you get it or you're fired. So
And did
that was
that
that. I
feel
mean,
like
initially,
did you like did that piss you off or
um, it was a little. I felt like it was a little harsh, a little abrasive, but I mean, it was a vaccine that was so brand new, hadn't been tested a ton. But I get it. We're in the face of this global pandemic, and the medical community is scared. I think it could have been worded better, definitely. I mean, for the flu vaccine every year, it's hey, you don't get it. Either you get it or you wear a mask at all times when you're in the emergency department. Cool, like, thank you, right? But with this, it was just so foot down. If you don't do it, you're gone.
you have to?
So I
Yeah.
thought that was just a little. I thought that was a little abrasive. But whatever. Initially we were all wearing masks 24/7 in the ER, no matter where you go, whatever. I mean, we couldn't even really like eat in the break room. It was insane. And then things, and there was no visitors whatsoever in the emergency department. Then things loosened up a little bit where visitors could come in if they didn't have symptoms and they were masked. And then we got to a point where it was just you only had to wear a mask in patient rooms. And now we're at a point where it's optional.
Oh
If I
yeah.
go into a room and someone's coughing up a lung, maybe I'll probably put on a mask. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But if I go in and you're here because you broke your arm, I don't see a reason to wear a
Yeah.
mask. I do think that there is some benefit to exposing yourself to stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's how we develop immunity. If you live in a bubble, then anything will kill you when you come out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, plus, we learned more about, hey, at first it was everybody. Then it was like, well, wait a second. There's people with pre-existing conditions of a certain sort, people of a certain age, yada yada yada, all that stuff. That like, okay, this makes people
yeah,
more vulnerable. And it seemed like, and at least from my experience, it seemed like on both sides there was just so little room for people in the know to be sitting down and and rather than just taking a position to sit down and try and puzzle this out in a way. Well, geez, maybe not everybody's
yeah.
got to get dressed up
Yeah,
like
there was
a
not great dialogue.
no, it's terrible.
There
Really.
wasn't great. I feel like there was not great dialogue. It was everyone was just so hard stance on one side, like mask at all times. This is the end of the world. This is gonna kill you. And other people's like, no mask. We need to expose ourselves. This is just the flu. And I feel like they should have found a way to meet in the middle. But I think because of
Yeah.
how highly politicized it became, and also just in medicine, a lot of folks because they have so much passion for their work and how much they love caring for people, it's hard for them to say anything aside from the most protective and maternal or paternal standpoint, which is to wrap you in a bubble and keep you safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Get it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is switching gears or not, but did you did your experience in the military and thereafter or growing up and and maybe even now living through that COVID piece, did it push you in a direction? Like, do you find yourself like, are you a more conservative person than a lot of the people you bump into? Are you
Mm.
the camps, right? And the conservative, liberal, whatever. But
Sure, sure.
do you like when you went through the military, your commander-in-chief is your
Mhm.
commander-in-chief, and I think a lot of people have the impression that people in the military are, uh, uh, unless you know a bunch of them, that people in the military are,
Sure.
well, certainly when they're in there, that's the commander-in-chief. Yeah, that's right. But I don't necessarily have to agree with that person, but right, but there are, or as a chain of command, etc. Did you find yourself being pushed in a particular direction, more conservative, more aligned with that world, or
Sure. Yeah, I think the military definitely pushed me a little bit more to a little more to the conservative side. But then my medical training, going to medical school in, UC San Francisco, definitely kind of yanked me in the other direction. So I try not to label myself because I think I
yeah,
have viewpoints that kind of sit on both sides there, and I kind of just take things, topic by topic and question by question, and do it that way. I don't think it makes sense to just pick a side and completely align with everything that they say
yeah.
with all those policymakers or whatever. It just makes no sense. And you're a robot. You're not a free thinker, and I'd rather be a free thinker. So
Okay, well, what do you think about what's going on? So all these kids on campuses protesting, uh, protesting that the college needs, at least in most cases, the college needs to divest any investments, et cetera, distance itself from Israel, et cetera, all that. Does it?
hmm.
Does that push your? Does that push your uh, former Marine? Well, you're never really a former Marine. No one's ever a former Marine, but does that push your
Hmm.
Marine identity in one direction or another, or not?
Um, I don't think so. I think that these students have the rights to free speech completely. They don't have the right to, batter and break down campuses. They don't have the right to obstruct students from going to do their, day-to-day lives and go to school and go to commencement. But they should be heard. You know, I think the problem with it is a lot of these students don't know really what they're fighting for or their cause. If you look, I mean, a lot of them, you can go ask them questions. So, what do you know about Palestine? What do you know about all these things? What do you know about the Gaza Strip and everything? And a lot of them don't know. It's just, I think a lot of our youth nowadays need identity. And sometimes they dive into these things just to feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And I know because I had that sense before I joined the Marine Corps. I know exactly what that's like. That was kind of my protest initially, right? That was my way of finding community and finding some sense of belonging. I think that I think that what's going on in over there. It's a very challenging situation. I don't like the loss of any innocent life, and I think if people want to protest that, they should be able to, but it needs to be done appropriately.
Here's something. So you're 37. Is that what you said? You're 37.
Mhm.
You got a lot of things under your belt. You've clearly got an inclination to 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 work at things that benefit others, right? Military service, medicine. The choice you even make within medicine, even then, the
Sure,
choices you make. You decide to go to some place where you feel like you can help people who have less padding, less padding between them and the concrete when they fall. And
sure.
so, do, do you think, do you think, you think of yourself? No, I don't even know how to ask this question. I guess what I'm wondering is, um, you would be a perfect role model for young people. Like,
Mm,
hey, look, this is a person who's making choices, conscious choices in the direction of benefiting others. Not that there's no benefit to you and all that, but
sure.
so should you be a role model? Do you see yourself as a role model? If
I try
somebody said
to
that to you, does it make you
live it.
nervous? Like, hey, wait a minute. No, no, I'm not a role model.
No, I mean, I try to live my life every day as if there was someone looking at me as a role model. That's kind of one of the things that helps guide my actions. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to be a good role model. I've got a family that I try to be a good role model to. I've given talks to minorities in medicine. I've talked to military recruits, and I have students that I help teach often, and I try to be a good role model to them. So, I think I think it's a good thing for an adult to be a role model because it really helps kind of push you and guide you in the right direction, even growing. Being a role model actually makes you better. So.
Yeah,
That
you
is
bet.
something
For
I
sure.
strive to be.
For sure. Um,
Yeah.
what what do you if so given that if you were a role model, what do you hope people get from you?
Oh, interesting. Well, I
I'm a
mean, I
role
would,
model, so I want them to walk
yeah,
away with something. What's that?
yeah. I mean, I think one thing is that most of our boundaries in life are self-proposed. We set our own limits often. I told myself when I was a kid I couldn't be a doctor, and look where I am now, right? I think a lot of those limits we put on ourselves, which we shouldn't. You should shoot for the stars and land where you do. I think be brave and speak up when you need to or when you feel is the right thing to do. Um, be loyal and be honest to people. I think that's really big for me. I think honesty and loyalty are huge. Your word is all you have many times, and once you lose someone's trust, it's very hard to earn that back.
You bet.
And keep your family close because you only get one. So
Yeah.
mine mean the world to me.
Yeah. That's great. That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
is there next? I mean, you're somebody who's like
Hmm.
from the outside looking in, when you tell your story, when you tell your story organically, well, okay, that makes sense. You were a kid, you wanted to be a doctor. You didn't quite have the discipline. You made a choice to put yourself in a place that maybe you could develop that. You did that. It's like, but you're also from the outside looking in, like, well, this is a guy who challenges himself, right? I'm gonna join you. I'm gonna join the Marines. I'm going. I'm going to go to. I think I should go back to school. No, no, no. I'm going to go to medical school, etc. So, and then I'm going to be an emergency doctor. And then, so,
Sure.
is there a next? I mean, are you like in the back of your mind is like, I think I want to be a cop or whatever it is. It's like, is there a next
uh,
mm, hurdle?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there are other things I'm already doing now. My buddy and I, we help train law enforcement and paramedic tactical medicine, or we help kind of teach them how to stay alive in tough situations and how to treat patients when you're under duress. So that's one thing I'm doing. I also help. I'm a medical director for an event medicine company, so I run medical at a lot of music festivals, which is really challenging because you never know what you're going to see there, especially
Well,
with
yes, you do.
overdoses and everything.
Yes, you do.
Yes, fair. Yeah,
You know what
okay.
you're
Yeah.
gonna
All right.
you don't have a
Uh,
particular manifestation, but you know it's there.
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. But I do think that there is a next. I remember one of my staff sergeants told me once that complacency kills. And I totally believe that. I think if I sit here and start getting a little stagnant in the waters and just waking up and going to work and doing the same thing every day, then I'm just going to lose the wind in my sails.
Yeah.
So I do think there is a next. I'm actively looking for something. I had a lot of thoughts about going into urban search and rescue through some of these FEMA teams here and trying to get on a team and do that. I've already done some of the training. I think that would be a fun thing and kind of dive into that vein of spontaneity and challenge that I like because you never know
Mhm,
when you're going to get called to go help out.
mhm.
Um, so there's definitely a next. This is not the final chapter.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's thinking about having this conversation with you. That was what was that was what I wanted the response to be. It was like this is a guy who is doing that and in such a good direction. Really, it's not
Thank you.
you're not necessarily. I mean, I don't care. I don't know how much money you have, but you're not motivated. That's not what you brought up. It's not like I want to make $1 billion before I'm 30. It's not like that. And so so good for you. I
Yeah.
mean, what a pleasure. So
Thank you.
so so if we stopped this conversation, what would you be disappointed that we hadn't spoken about or that you hadn't had an opportunity to say?
Wow, that's a good question. Wow, I hadn't thought about it. This was a good conversation. Hmm, that is a good question. What would I wish I'd spoken more about? I don't know. That's
Yeah,
tough.
it
That's
is.
tough. I
It's
mean, we
hard to
touched
know.
on a
Maybe I
lot of
mean
topics.
maybe we've done it, but but
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
sometimes afterwards like, oh God, I mean I had this experience with actually Zach's dad, who at the very end of
Mhm.
our conversation really he said, oh, I forgot this whatever, and turned it back on and did part two.
Oh,
But
oh, interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, I thought my experience in that COVID unit was really interesting. When I was working with Team Rubicon, um, when I was in my last year of residency, when COVID was obviously going pretty strong. There were a lot of homeless folks who were catching COVID, and our
sure.
hospitals didn't really we just couldn't take everybody. And when they were semi-stable enough to be discharged, but didn't have anywhere to discharge them, we had to figure out something to do. So Team Rubicon stepped in, which they do a lot of disaster relief, and they took over the Santa Clara Convention Center, and they just put a ton of cots in there and some medical supplies, and I reached out and I actually ended up running that unit for quite some time. So during the daytime, and I was just a medical resident, which I thought was fascinating. But during the daytime, I'd be in the hospital working, and then at night I would go there. I'd round on all the patients, check on them, get their vital signs,
And it was entirely
and
COVID. It was entirely a COVID
only COVID. It was
distressed
only COVID.
population.
And I remember I'd go in there and just sit with them and talk to them, and we'd sometimes even play cards. And I found it so interesting. There was I learned so much more about medicine and so much more about how you even evaluate people. Just having conversations with them, seeing from the beginning how they'd speak in 3-4 word sentences to the 10th day, we'd be having full conversations. They're breathing normally, they're acting normal. You can see so much with that. You didn't need a pulse oximeter. You didn't need your stethoscope. You didn't need all that, even though we had a lot of
Hmm.
that stuff. Just by sitting there and having a conversation at a table with them, we were able to one liven their spirits, but to also see how well they were doing. And it was tough. I was tired as hell all the time. And I was
But
sleeping on a cot. At times, there was a couple of times where I just grabbed a big orange trash bag and wrapped that around myself as a blanket. Fortunately, I produced a lot of body heat. But
so do you think
yeah.
that experience, you have any insight into how that experience may have affected how you are a doctor now?
I think so. I mean, one, just seeing the appreciation that population had for us. A lot of it's tough. We get a lot of homeless patients in emergency departments, and sometimes they just want to get out of the cold, and sometimes they just want a sandwich, and some folks get irritated at that or upset. And for me, especially having sat there and talked to them and get to know them and hear their stories, I have a lot more respect and love for that population. A lot of people think that a lot of homeless people are crazy, but what we don't realize is a lot of people actually with mental illness become homeless because of that mental illness and getting, you know, just pushed away from society and their circle and kind of losing their work. So I don't know.
Oh,
It helped me become
but
definitely more loving towards that population, but it also helped again kind of show me that I can handle. One, it helped me show that I was ready to become an attending. I was seeing over there 50, 60 patients on my own at night. Um, and it just showed me that one of those challenges, I put myself in a situation to show myself that I'd be able to do it. And fortunately, we did. Everyone turned out okay. But I love that experience, definitely.
but that was toward the end of your residency when COVID was full blown. Yeah.
It was my last year residency.
And
Yeah.
so you would work, so you were in residency, you'd work all day and then Jesus.
I'd go there at night. Yeah, I'd check on everyone. I'd do my rounds, and then I would just lay on a cot and get some sleep, and then go into work in the morning. It sounds crazy, but sometimes when you're doing something that means a lot to you like that, the sleep doesn't make as much of a difference. Getting a few hours, I was still amped. I was like, I'm playing a role. I'm helping people. Like
Yeah.
that's what fuels my fire is helping others, and just putting a smile on someone else's face, even though sometimes it takes me telling a really stupid joke, but I'll do it. Just making other people happy and feel better is what fuels my fire. So I loved it.
Oh, cool. Well, that is a
Yeah.
perfect way to end the conversation. That is really so. Owner Yanigan, what a nice guy. I wish I had more time. Well, now I know where you live, right? So
Yeah, you sure do.
So
that's true. You really do, though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what a pleasure! What a pleasure it is.
You're listening to Curiosity Invited with David Bryan here on LA Talk Radio.